Hello and welcome back, and that's right, I want to talk about a new Synology. This is the new RS822 Plus, also known as the RS822RP Plus, because it's got a redundant power supply, but it's a really long name, so I'm not going to say it that much in this video. This is their latest 4-bay rack mount solution. Now, I say their latest 4-bay rack mount solution because they actually unveiled another 4-bay rack mount 1U solution within the last month or so, known as the RS422. So although we are going to talk about this system, this new one that's been revealed, what it can do, what it can't do, I am going to be drawing comparison occasionally against the RS422 Plus, because I think there's a lot of distinction between them, and I think this is an interesting move by Synology within their business portfolio, and particularly within those 1U rack mounts. But before we go any further, has anyone else noticed that Synology has really been prioritising kind of business class solutions and high-end hyperscale solutions? And at this time of year, particularly in 2022, a number of us, myself included, were wondering where were the little prosumer, home user, value, 2-bay, 4-bay and the like. We've not seen these solutions appear on the radar. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not coming, but it certainly is surprising that right now, recording in June 2022, that we've not seen these solutions arrive on the marketplace yet. But back to the RS822 Plus. Now, its hardware architecture is going to be very familiar to a number of you that have already been looking at Synology solutions. It's arriving with that AMD embedded Ryzen, and that is the V1500B, a quad-core 2.2 gigahertz processor there. It doesn't have embedded graphics, but it does have onboard encryption. It does have a great little floating point. It's got I believe it's an 8-threaded processor as well. So again, this 4-core 8-thread CPU is going to be quite good for business and transfers, as well as the DDR4 ECC memory that arrives with. But the system only arrives with 2 gig of memory, which feels a little mean to me. I know it can be upgraded up to 32 gig, and again, it is error correcting code memory, which is great for stable transfers and making sure you're not getting any inconsistencies on day one that hit you on day 1000. But this kind of time of Synology releasing these SMB solutions with 2 gig by default, they've been doing it now for the better part of 5 to 7 years, and I think now the minimum standard, particularly DSM-7 and 7.1 being a much more fully featured platform, I think 2 gig of memory seems a little tight there. I would have hoped to arrive with at least 4. But still, the ability to upgrade up to 32 gig means for things like virtualization, and of course, if you are going to be using widespread surveillance on this system without a CPU that's got embedded graphics, that additional memory is going to be very useful for multiple connected tasks and services at any given time. Now, if we look at that RS422 Plus that was recently unveiled, both of these systems have got 2 gig of ECC memory, but that system arrived with a different embedded Ryzen there. It was a dual-core, the R1600, which is a dual-core 2.6 gigahertz processor that can be burst up to 3.1. So a much higher clock speed on that CPU, but still, that is a dual-core, and this is a quad-core. And I think, depending on the user, that is going to make a big difference to you. There are other key differences that I'll talk about later on, but for now, let's talk a little bit about something that I'm surprised isn't on this. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Why doesn't this system feature M2 NVMEs? Synology seemed to be hell for leather on advertising the use of M2 NVMe SSDs as the benefits of caching on larger scale system storage. They even upgraded and improved the caching operations and the individual services of DSM-7. Yet on this system, again, like many rack mounts, it doesn't seem to have M2 NVMEs as standard. It's available as an upgrade option via PCIe that we'll talk about later on, but it's still strange that it's not there on day one. Now, I mentioned it's a redundant power supply version out there. Again, this system has a 150 watt PSU, so the redundant PSU version, a little bit deeper, arrives with two PSUs on the rear, a couple of 150 watt PSUs. I mentioned the depth of the chassis. This system isn't like one of those half depth 30 centimeter jobs. This one's about half a meter, dotting around between 49 and 50 odd centimeters, depending on the PSU version you go for. And again, another thing that always seems to surprise me about Synology, it doesn't arrive with rails. like a solution like this, yes, you're probably going to be putting it into an existing rack cabinet, but I always think it's weird that rails are an optional purchase. I understand there are different kinds of rails, and therefore you might go sliding, you might go static, but still, I think just having the static rails or even some default simple rails included, it's not going to be that much more expensive. And I think most users need rails on day one, but maybe, disagree with me in the comments if you think otherwise. Now, if we talk about the ports and connections on this device, again, this is expandable NAS. Another thing lacking in the RS422 Plus there, which not only couldn't upgrade its memory, but that system couldn't upgrade its storage. It was 4 bays and that's all you got. This system can be expanded by another 4 bays of storage with the RX418. So again, you've got your 4 bays of storage on day one. It can be upgraded, which again is always going to be useful, and it's via that eSATA connector there on the rear, but it's still not a vast amount of storage. Relatively, it's 100% more storage, but in the grand scheme of things, a lot of users will look at maybe 8-bay systems anyway and look at their expandability, but still, if you're looking at a 1U, it's nice to have that option, right? But one thing about this device, and I know it feels like I'm being very negative, and I don't mean to be, but once again, the system's arriving with 1 Gigabit Ethernet, and most of us would have anticipated that at this point. Synology seems to have committed to Gigabit Ethernet on this system. It's got 4 of them on there, 4 little LANs there on the rear, meaning link aggregation or port trunking is an option with a smart switch. Indeed, whether you're going to use load balancing or any of the other aggregated methods, there are ways to get out of that 1 gigabit threshold. But this 4-bay 1U system has got a tremendous amount of throughput possible, even in a RAID 5. So those 1 GBE ports are a real pain for me. And I know a number of you watching this will say, why would I go for 2.5 GBE? I could just go straight up to 10 GBE. Who cares about 2.5 GBE? Now, I agree with you. 10 GBE is clearly better. It's also clearly more expensive. And although a lot of users will look at 10 GB and go, well, it only cost me a few extra £100, I'll get a 10 GBE solution. You've got to factor in 10 GBE upgrades on all the rest of your client hardware that you intend to interact with this system on. Additionally, although some of you might say 2.5 GBE, you're going to have to upgrade those. You're right, you would have to upgrade them. But at the moment, most other hardware providers that bring out 2.5 GBE on their servers do it at the same cost as 1 GBE. And additionally, 2.5 GBE adapters are dirt cheap, 20 or 30 quid per system. 10 GBE, nowhere near as affordable as that. And finally, future-proofing. If you're looking at a system and you're considering buying it and you want it to last at least 3 to 5 years, let's be honest, you know right now that 2.5 GBE and indeed 10 GBE are nowhere near as mainstream as 1 GBE, but you don't know where the market will be in 3 to 5 years. Why inhibit yourself? Now, it's not the end of the road. This system has a PCIe upgrade slot. Of course, this PCI slot will allow you to add 10 GBE, add a dual port 10 GBE, add a combo card with M2 NVMe SSD caching and 10 GBE. Hell, this system supports the 25 gig fiber card that's got 2 25 GBE ports, so that's 50 gig to play with. This system couldn't hope to saturate that. But the fact that they are all additional purchases is what I'm going on about there with the 1 GBEs. I do think they're useful and they're not really going to inhibit this system too much, but I just think it's weird to me that we're still seeing 1 GBE on systems like this even now in 2022. Now, there is, of course, some USB ports there. There are 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports there, so 5 Gigabit Ethernet. 5 gigabits per second. Sorry, I'm really under the weather today. Those ports there, Synology have kind of eased back on some of their support of USB. There are a lot of the accessories that were supported USB connectivity on Synology in DSM 6.2. have slowly been whittled down in DSM 7. There's things like UPSs on there and some office accessories, but not many. And overall, the USB ports on this, particularly on this rack mount, are going to be good for a localized backup, a DAS or JBOD USB storage device, but not a vast amount more than that there. Again, you've got UPSs, you've got support of those office peripherals. Now, as good as this system is for what it is as a 1U rack mount, I've got to say that when comparing this versus the RS422, The big kicker for many of you is going to be that price tag. It's going to be the more powerful dual core versus, or the more powerful and efficient dual core versus the more capable and scalable RS822 we have here. This is not an enormous jump from the RS820 and 820RP Plus that came before it. The CPU has changed on this, and it certainly has a much improved performance capability on DSM7 and general throughput. We've seen that when systems have moved from that Intel CS3538 Atom onto this embedded Ryzen. But still, this is not a really sexy, exciting NAS here. This is quite a middle of the road system, and I think a lot of you, if you're going to judge this system, need to judge it as such. And it's certainly a very scalable and upgradable NAS in about 4 or 5 different ways, and I think we have to give it credit for that. But that's all we know about this system. Right now, in terms of price and availability, realistically, it's going to arrive at pretty much bang on the same price as the 820 did before it. It's going to do that. Synology are very good at maintaining that price. They normally up it by a few percent. Inflation, hardware costs, and again, right now there are hardware shortages. In terms of availability, we've already started seeing it appearing and listing on numerous Eastern sites, Japan and Synology's own Taiwanese website. So again, the information's out there, which largely means this system's probably going to arrive within the next month or so here in the West. But it'll be interesting to see. But this has been the RS822 Plus. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, if you think I've been too harsh, if you think I've been too lenient, let me know. If you enjoyed the video, click like. It genuinely helps me understand what I'm doing right and wrong. Click subscribe to learn more, because we cover pretty much everything to do with NAS, data storage, anything really. And of course, if you need some help, the free advice section is linked in the description. But otherwise, I will see you next time.